Welcome to Short Movie Channel. Today's movie begins with Mrs. Maya stepping out to throw the trash in the bin. She greets her neighbor, Amanda, who smiles back at her. At that moment, Clara, Maya's daughter, comes out of the house, takes her dog, and plays with it for a while. When Clara returns home and goes inside, she hears a strange noise. She heads to the room to check what's going on and is shocked to find her mother hanging by a noose. Clara screams loudly, but suddenly she wakes up. Here we learn that Clara is 20 years old, and ever since her mother's death, she's been haunted by the same nightmare every single day. Clara starts her day by waking up, getting dressed, and preparing to head out to college. She rides her bike and waves at Mrs. Amanda before leaving. Clara is an engineering student, and while riding her bike, she spots a young man named Augustus and greets him. Shortly after, she gets hit by a car near the trash bin. It seems like it was on purpose. Clara injures her leg but manages to pick herself up and continue on her way to college. When she arrives, she notices her classmates staring at her with disdain, something she's used to because her father works as a janitor at the college. When she sees him, she asks him to leave so she doesn't feel embarrassed in front of her peers. Her father complies and walks away. Clara meets up with her two only friends, Lena and Maggie, who are the only ones in the school who treat her kindly. While she's with them, the other students start bullying her, especially a girl named Ravelli, who turns out to be the same person who hit her with the car earlier that morning. Ravelli doesn't stop there. She also throws trash on Clara and mocks her by saying she's just like her father. Clara tries to keep her composure but gets upset when she sees Chris, the guy she's deeply in love with, ignoring her completely because he's dating Ravelli. After classes, everyone heads out for lunch. Ravelli continues to harass Clara, pushing her buttons to the point where Clara can no longer control herself. She fights back, and they end up in a physical altercation, while everyone around them records the fight until the principal arrives and breaks it up. Later, Clara heads home but stops by Mrs. Amanda's house to share everything that happened, including her feelings for Chris. When she finally gets home, she finds her father and his friends there. Her father gives her a small wish-granting toy, explaining that he found it while cleaning an old trash bin. Clara takes the toy, goes to her room, and tries to open it multiple times but fails. That night, while browsing the internet, Clara sees photos of Chris and Ravelli together, which makes her furious. She grabs the toy and wishes for Ravelli to get a flesh-eating disease. Then she goes to sleep. The next morning, Ravelli wakes up to find her body covered in rotting flesh. Photos of her condition spread online, revealing that she's suffering from a rare skin disease. Clara sees the photos and realizes her wish came true. While Ravelli's friends go around collecting money for her surgery, Clara laughs and returns home, feeling pleased. She picks up the wish-granting toy again and wishes for Chris to fall madly in love with her. However, when she goes to college the next day, nothing changes. Chris still acts as if she doesn't exist. That evening, Clara hears the news that her neighbor Augustus has passed away. She quickly grabs the toy and wishes that Augustus left her his entire inheritance. At night, Clara's father tells her that the lawyer informed him that Augustus will states all his inheritance will go to her. Clara is surprised that Augustus would leave her all this wealth, but she doesn't care about anything except the money. She convinces her father to quit his job as a garbage collector, and they move into Augustus' luxurious house, taking his cars as well. Clara begins buying makeup and showing off to her classmates, but she is still upset that Chris doesn't care about her. Later, while Clara is sitting in her room, she is startled to see the wishing toy opening on its own and starting to move. At the same time, Mrs. Amanda is in her kitchen when her hair suddenly gets caught in the garbage disposal. Tragically, she can't free herself, her neck breaks, and she dies. Meanwhile, Clara remains seated, watching the toy as it moves. Her father walks in, holding some drawings, and tells her they belong to her mother, and were made before she committed suicide. Clara is puzzled about how her mother could have drawn such cheerful pictures but still ended her life. Her father explains that her mother had secrets that would make her suddenly sad and scared, but she never shared them with anyone. He leaves the room, and Clara remains alone. That night, Clara dreams about the wishing toy pulling her in. She wakes up terrified and steps onto the balcony to get some air. She notices a strange shadow and quickly turns to see what it is, but nothing is there. She decides to ignore it to avoid scaring herself and goes back to bed. The next morning, while standing near her locker at college, Clara sees Chris talking to a girl he is dating, telling her he doesn't want to talk to her anymore. Clara is surprised since Chris is known for being a ladies' man. A little later, Chris approaches Clara and admits he has been thinking about her a lot lately and wants to talk to her but has been too shy. He asks for her number and suggests they go out together. Clara is shocked and can't believe it. Later, in the lecture hall, Clara pulls out a picture of the wishing toy and stares at it. She notices old Chinese writing on it but doesn't understand it. She asks Mark for help finding someone who can translate it. Mark tells her that his cousin studies ancient languages and offers to take her to meet her. On the way, Mark tries to talk to Clara because he likes her, but she ignores him. When they arrive, Clara shows the toy to the cousin, who examines it and finds 4 words written on it: promises, proof, execution, and debt repayment. The cousin explains that the words are unclear and don't seem to have a direct meaning. They also discover a name written on the toy, which, after some research, is linked to an ancient Chinese legend. The legend tells of a city called Amando that was struck by a plague. A girl named Lumi went to a specific tree and begged the devil to save her and her family. 7 days later, she returned with the toy, and indeed, her family survived and became very wealthy. However, within a year, her entire family died one by one, and Lumi ended her own life. The cousin offers to work on decoding the phrases written on the toy. Clara thanks her and leaves with Mark. On their way home, Clara sees her father standing with his friend near the garbage bins. She angrily yells at him, telling him that they are now wealthy, have money and cars, and he no longer needs this job. She returns home feeling upset, takes out the wishing toy, and wishes for her father to quit his job and stay away from his friend. After that, Clara goes with her friends to attend a party. At the same time, the Chinese girl is at home alone. The power goes out, so she tries to check the circuit breaker but stumbles and dies. The next day, Mark goes to check on her, only to find her dead. He quickly leaves and runs into Clara, who is walking with Chris. He tells her what happened and says that the game must have something to do with what's going on. He also shares that he researched the legend and found that wishes always come at the cost of blood. However, Clara tells him she doesn't understand what he's talking about and leaves. Clara heads to the college auditorium, but she's distracted and unfocused. After the lecture, she plans to sit with her friends, but Chris calls her over. She goes to sit with him, and at that moment, Raphael feels upset and leaves. All of Chris's friends follow her, leaving only Chris and Clara together. Clara feels frustrated, thinking everyone hates her. She goes home, picks up the wish game, and wishes to be the most popular girl in college. Later, Chris calls and invites her to a party he's hosting. She goes and has a great time. When she returns home and sleeps, she dreams of her mother smiling, but her expression quickly turns sad. Instead of seeing her mother hanging from the noose, she sees herself this time. She wakes up terrified and notices a strange shadow in her room, but no one is there. She decides to ignore it and goes back to bed. The next morning, Mark talks to Clara about the wish game, telling her it might be connected to the Chinese girl's death. Clara visits Mrs. Amanda to learn more but finds her dead for some time without anyone noticing. Devastated, she heads to college and tells her friends she's in big trouble. Clara takes her friends to her house, shows them the game, and explains everything that's happened. They laugh it off, thinking it's just a simple wish game. Clara insists that everything she wished for came true, but they scold her for not wishing something good for them as well. Maggie tries to calm her down, assuring her they're there for her, and nothing bad will happen. Maggie advises Clara to get rid of the game, but Clara finds herself unable to throw it away and puts it back in its usual spot. At the next party, Clara sees Chris and sits with him. While talking, she accidentally picks up his phone and discovers photos of herself sleeping. She panics and confronts him, saying she was terrified and that what he did wasn't okay. She leaves angrily. Meanwhile, Maggie faces danger when something heavy nearly falls on her, but Lena saves her just in time. At the same moment, Clara's father is driving his car and experiences a bizarre accident. While all this is happening, the wish game continues to activate itself in Clara's house. Clara sits with Maggie and Lena after the party. She tells Maggie that she didn't throw the game away and still has it at home. At the same time, her father is fixing his car but encounters strange events, like a car speeding toward him and a tire rolling away on its own. Lena is also in the elevator, but it suddenly malfunctions and crashes, killing her. Maggie screams at Clara, blaming her and the cursed game for everything that's happening. At that moment, Mark arrives and takes Clara to his house to show her the truth about the game. He reveals photos of all the people who had the game and made wishes. He explains that they all ended up either committing suicide or being killed and that after 7 wishes, everything falls apart. Clara breaks down, crying, and tells him she has already made 5 wishes. She begs him to help her so she doesn't lose anyone else. After that, Clara returns home with Mark, and they try to destroy the wish game. However, they realize that the game is as hard as a rock and cannot be broken in any way. She leaves it in its place and decides not to take it out again. Clara goes to bed, but she dreams of the same terrifying nightmares that have been haunting her. She wakes up startled to find Chris standing in her room. He tells her he can't live without her and apologizes for upsetting her before. Chris appears to be insanely in love with her to the point that he takes out a knife and slits his wrists, so she won't leave him. Clara starts screaming, realizing that Chris has become obsessed with her. When Clara tells Chris everything that has happened, he tells her that he still hasn't found a solution to the problem. They head together to check on the wish game but discover that it's missing. At that moment, Clara hears some noise and finds the police standing with her father. They tell her that Mr. Augustus hasn't paid his taxes for 15 years, and because of that, they're seizing the house, cars, and money. Clara and her father are forced to move back to their old home. Clara starts riding her bike to school again, and things slowly return to normal. However, her friends continue to bully and mock her. One day, Clara sees Maggie standing in front of her locker and notices the wish game inside. She tries to take it back, but Maggie refuses, and they end up fighting. Mark steps in to calm things down and tries to take the game from Clara, but she refuses and runs home with it. Clara becomes extremely anxious and feels like the game is controlling her completely. She wishes for her mother to come back to life and not have taken her own life. At that very moment, Clara hears a knock at the door. Her mother is alive, coming to celebrate Clara's birthday with her. She's even brought 2 little girls with her, who turn out to be Clara's sisters. Mrs. Amanda is also still alive. Clara can't believe what's happening and enters her mother's art studio. As soon as she steps inside, she notices a painting of the wish game. Clara recalls that her mother once had the game, which is why she ended her own life. Clara starts screaming, blaming her mother for everything that happened. Looking out the window, Clara sees her father using a chainsaw to cut some trees, but the chainsaw slips, and he dies. Clara quickly runs to the wish game, screaming and begging it to take her back to the moment her father gave her the game. Suddenly, she finds herself awake before everything happened. She sees her father rummaging through the trash can and hurries over, offering to help. She does this so she can grab the game before he finds it. She takes it with her to school. At school, Clara hugs her friends Maggie and Lena, feeling overjoyed to have them back. She looks for Mark, and when she finds him, she hands him the bag containing the wish game, asking him to bury it in a faraway place where no one can ever find it. She also apologizes to him for how she treated him before and confesses that she loves him. She kisses him and runs off to join her friends. But as she's running, she gets hit by Raphael's car and dies. In the end, it's revealed that the 7th and final rule of the wish game is that the devil claims the soul of the person who makes 7 wishes. And with that, our movie concludes for today. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to support us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you did.